Bishop Amos, Sister Joan, honored board members, faculty, family and friends of the class of 2012. When Sister Joan asked me to deliver your commencement address, I was both honored and confused. As you see, I'm not a motivational speaker. I'm just a heart surgeon. Most of my patients were asleep when I worked with them. But I owe a lot to the dedication and success of my life to St. Ambrose College. So here I am, and here you are, the class of 2012 on the same campus, or nearly the same campus, that I was 54 years ago. I'm taking advice from my oldest granddaughter, who now is working in London, England, having graduated from Vanderbilt. Her advice in my speech here today was, keep it short. I get it. Your generations are mass of brevity. You can type a few letters into text to communicate thoughts, requests, and emotions in shorthand. That's certainly foreign language to me, so I'll be brief. But let me be clear, I'm not speaking in acronyms. This is your commencement. It is the beginning of a new phase of your life, with new challenges, new rules, and new opportunities. There isn't a guidebook to help you chart your way, but the education that you receive here at St. Ambrose will help you light the path before you. I didn't realize it at the time, but this university was preparing me to seize opportunity I didn't know existed, conquer challenges that I didn't think I would face, and to find strength I didn't know I had. On my journey from St. Ambrose led me to Marquette, where this week I'll be celebrating my 50th year graduating from med school. I've spent 2/3 of my life as a physician, most of them as a heart surgeon. As though the important lessons that I've learned over these past 50 years is change, and I think you know what this is. When I graduated from St. Ambrose, the only telephones were land fixed lines. They did nothing but transmit phone calls. A call across over here to Moline was a long-distance phone call. A call out of the country was very difficult. You had to talk to operators on both sides of the country. It was very expensive and time-consuming. Well, here we are 54 years later. I'm holding a pocket-sized telephone, but it's also a computer information. I've got 28 books right here. Got the Bible, got a few other books too, mind you. It's also a movie camera and professional quality library, and it does a whole lot of things that you know better than I. In my chosen field, heart surgery, we've seen enormous changes. When I started my career, scientists had just discovered that we could literally stop the heart, open the heart, operate on it, and hopefully it would start up again. We used a heart-lung machine that was made out of old washing machine parts. We used a slush that was similar to what you get from 7-Eleven to cool the heart. Surgery took 10 to 12 hours. We used 14 units of blood. We didn't have the monitoring machines and the sophisticated anesthetic drugs that we have today. So no matter how technically capable the surgeon and how the surgery went, the mortality rate was still 8 to 10%. We were pioneers. We learned as we went. In today's medicine, open heart surgery is commonplace. A quadruple bypass takes 2.5 hours. We set up 2 units of blood. 75% of the time we don't use any. Operative mortality is 1%. This kind of surgery is done in many small towns and community hospitals, not just in the big major medical centers and the teaching centers. During the past few years, I was also a pioneer again. We were doing heart surgery with robots. I had the 3rd unit in the United States to do open heart surgery. I then spent a week in East Germany, then worked in a research 1.5 years, working out the problems with using the robot. And it's really interesting. Usually when you're a heart surgeon, you're looking directly at the heart. But here, the patient was over in this area of the room, the surgeon was back over here. You had your shoes off, you had these pedals, and you had one little incision in the patient that was about 1.25 inches, and you had 3 other about the size of a dime. You were looking through 2 little piece is about the size of this mic, and the machine then would move only 1/5 of whatever my finger moved. It would, if I had a shaker or a trimmer, it would take that out. So it was incredible. Anyway, one of my colleagues was in Baltimore and did a case successfully in Thailand. I could be here in Devonport, Iowa today and do a case in Dallas. Someday, we may well be able to operate in space with a land-based surgeon using the technique. Also used for 5.5 years cyber surgery, whereby we were putting little gold beads into the lung adjacent to the cancer. Then we'd have a robot with a computerized system. As you breathe up and down, the cancer moves up and down, but this would follow it and track it. So it was just as if I had taken a knife and excised that. It is marvelous, and it's going to be one of the things that we're going to be doing a lot more of. We also had incredible advances in organ transplantation. I did heart and lung transplant surgery for 5.5 to 6 years, even transplanting the whole heart and pulmonary system from a donor to a recipient. The immune system has been worked out much better, and so we have much fewer problems with rejection. And then there's the medical advices that have been designed. You know, recently that our vice president had a assist device, a left mate, heart mate as we call it. It was a bridge to transplantation, could be used, which is what he had. He was one of the fortunate that did have a transplant, but it also could have been for destination. In other words, he could have it the rest of his life, and that's being done. The next thing that I see is a major change is the internet. I had a case that I'd done many times before, very familiar with it, was easy, straightforward, but I wanted to go to the internet, which I did, and put on some comments. The first thing you know, with 8 to 10 minutes, I got a lot of suggestions on how to do the case from all over the world. I'm including China and Japan, areas such as that. The patient I operated on the following morning did very well, by the way. Then all the advances that have occurred, there are certain ethical and moral questions. One of the great figures in my field, Dr. Christian Bernard, who was the first to do a heart transplant, stated, as fast as we create ways to extend life, we're inventing ways to shorten it. So in your lives, you will not only be producing new breakthroughs that will benefit your society, but you'll also be faced with moral decisions relating to what you do with this new technology. For me, when I graduated medical school, life expectancy in us men was 66 years. Today it's 76, and you women, you live 5 years longer. This is going to be a problem. Someone's got to pay for this extra years. We've got a whole lot more things that we can do, these expensive medicines and procedures to diagnose and treat these ailments that people routinely died 50 years ago. Then, as a surgeon, I was often faced with whether to or not to operate on. For an example, take an 85-year-old grandmother who the family loves very much, has a cancer of the lung, but also has Alzheimer's disease and associated degenerative disease such as diabetes, hypertension, and so on. I could operate, I could cure her, I know that, but should I? And then there's also genetic advances. Some of you know a lot more of this, about this than I do. I can draw a small aliquot of blood and tell you with some degree of certainty that you will be developing Alzheimer's or pancreatic cancer, some other dread disease. But who's going to pay for it? The insurance companies, are they going to sell you insurance or not? Then there's problems with the stem cell research. We may be able to reduce embryos for these spare parts. We know right now that there's 3,500 adult research projects going on with stem cells that someday may well be the answer. Then there are ethical questions in transplantation. What constitutes brain death? Who should be able to sell your organs? Who should receive a transplant? And what is the end of life support? Now let's connect these dots. What are these changes that I've seen in medicine to have to do with your graduation? No matter what field you go into, when you leave here, you're going to see dynamic changes. How you deal with these changes are going to define who you are, professionally and personally. Professionally and personally. Protect your character. It is one of the greatest assets. As Philip Brooks once said, be such a man or woman who lives like that. Every man, or such as you, and every life here is yours. This earth will be God's paradise. St. Ambrose has given you the tools you need to live this life. You received a first-rate education, and importantly, in a faith-based setting. This will help you keep your priorities straight in life. I always told my surgical residents when they're on my service, first God, then family, then your work. Your intellect and talents are a gift from God. He holds the owner's manual. Keep in touch with him through prayer, that when you seek his advice and help, you'll recognize his voice when he answers you. Your second priority is your family. Look around and see those mom, dads, uncles and aunts and grandparents and friends who are with you today and are supporting you along the way. A loving husband, a loving wife, kids who you know as you grow up and share your values that you taught them, and then someday grandchildren. I have 6 children, 14 grandchildren. If you don't spend your time with them when they're young, you can't expect them to spend your time when you're older. And all the plaques on the wall and the accolades and certificates go gently into a box and then into the attic. It will be your family that your treasures and pleasure. When God and family are seen to, then go to work. You'll be fortified and prepared for the exciting changes that are coming your way. God bless the class of 2012. St. Ambrose, thank you and congratulations.